Well, greetings and salutations, everybody. Welcome to AMC Mailbag, the all-mailbag installment here on AMC Movie News, where all we do is take your mailbag questions. My name is John Campea. I'm the editor-in-chief of AMC Movie News. And listen, if you've got a topic or a question you'd like to just have some movie chat about with some friends, those of us here at AMC Movie News, email us anytime at amcmovietalk@gmail.com, and maybe you'll see your question or comment on AMC Mailbag or AMC Movie Talk during the week. I want to welcome, first of all, coming back to join me again, Miss Ashley Mova. Ashley,
hey
thanks
guys.
for being here.
Thanks for having me, John. Like your shirt, representing.
Yeah, got to wear the patch, of course, wherever we go. So like I said, it's Mailbag today. We're just going to get into your questions. Great weekend at the movie, so let's get into it. Ashley, what are we starting with?
The Joker writes, "Hello, Sons of AMC, the best damn movie-related show on the planet Earth."
Damn right.
Since the Civil War storyline will be in Captain America 3, although I really thought they would make an Avengers movie for that storyline, my question is this. I think it would be great if they did 2 movies for Civil War story, first part in Captain America 3 and the second one in Iron Man 4. By doing this, we'll get both Rogers and Tony's side, and I think it'll be really cool this way. Anyway, what do you guys think? Also, do you think one movie is enough to fit the Civil War story? And keep bringing on the filthy.
Well, let's start with the second part of your question. Is one movie enough to tell this story? The answer is absolutely yes. It's absolutely. Because, I find a lot of times my brethren, the comic book fans, they seem to think that, this comes up all the time. You can't tell this story in one movie. You can't tell that story in one movie. Remember, Steven Spielberg just told the story of Lincoln in one movie. Now, granted, it was pretty long, but it was one movie, right? And granted, it only focused on a certain part of his life, but it focused on like one of the most pivotal, important moments in the history of the United States of America. And they told it in one movie. Right. So well, nominated for Best Picture. So, yes, you can tell these stories in one movie. And the Civil War, remember, Civil War is not going to be the carbon copy story of what it is in the comic books. This is going to be a different Civil War story than the one we get in the comics. Kevin Feige's told us that, and we should be aware of that. And we shouldn't be scared about that. We mentioned on yesterday's mailbag, X-Men Days of Future Past, big departures from the comic books. Captain America, Winter Soldier, big departure from the comic story. And those are 2 of the best movies of the year. Mm-hmm. So, and I also think this is a story you need to do and get it out of the way. Mm-hmm. I don't believe you stretch this over multiple films. Also because what he suggested in the email is, do Captain America 3 to start Civil War and then do an Iron Man 4 later. Well, then that would mean that all the movies in between have to be reflective of the Civil War storyline going on. And you can't start bringing that story and making it influence every other film that's going on. Tell the story, tell it well, tell it in 2 hours and 20 minutes, and knock it out of the park. I believe they will do it. If they can do it for Days of Future Past, they can do it for the Civil War storyline. And quite frankly, I don't want to hear Tony's side of it. I really don't. I mean, the way it's setting up, Captain America is actually the one who's kind of in the right here. And we're going to understand why Tony takes the government's position. And we're going to understand why he does it, but it's still the wrong position. And I think that the fact that this is a Captain America movie is going to highlight that. Mm-hmm. And I believe the movie is going to end with Tony coming around and seeing things Captain America's way. So that's how I see it kind of playing. I could be wrong. Totally could be wrong. But it doesn't change the fact that they can tell this in one movie, and I'm confident that they can.
Do you think that they will, or do you think they're leaning towards more of a 2-movie type deal?
Well, I remember when the first reports came out, it suggested that Captain America 3 was going to start the Civil War storyline. Mm-hmm. That would culminate in Avengers 3, and Avengers 3 would be Avengers 3 Civil War, right? Turns out that was completely wrong. So, no, I do believe they are going to keep it to one film. Okay. I really do. And I think it's going to be awesome.
Can't wait. Tyler Navarro writes, with Marvel moving forward with the cinematic storyline, how do you think they will address loose ends that haven't been explained? For example, what happens to the Red Skull or the leader from the Incredible Hulk? Thanks and keep up the great work.
Well, I mean, these are all... Both of those situations, the Red Skull and the leader, for example, and there are a number of other examples like this too. These are very, very loose threads. Mm-hmm. These are not plot points that are, these things have to be addressed. Okay, look, let's say Captain America 2 ends with, there's an end credit scene where Black Widow goes to Steve Rogers and says, you need to know I'm pregnant. Dun, dun, dun. And then the credits roll, right? Well, you have to address that. When you do your next movie, you can't just dance around that issue. This has to be addressed, right? If at the end of, Avengers Age of Ultron, if you find out, if, I don't know, if Dr. Selvig comes back and says, at the end of the movie, they've won, they've beaten Ultron, and then Dr. Selvig says, the Incredible Hulk's mind is now gone. It is only the Hulk remains. Dr. Banner is gone. Only the Hulk is left. Dun, dun, dun. Credits roll, right? Well, you have to address that. You can't now just go into another Avengers film and everything's back to normal. Those are big dangling plot lines that you have to address. Things like the Red Skull, just being sucked into the vortex. Okay, the connotation here is that the Red Skull's gone. There's an opening there that you could bring him back with some explanation if you so wanted to, but it's not a outstanding plot device that has to be explained. The leader thing at the end of The Incredible Hulk, that's an avenue you've opened that you can pursue if you want, but it's not like Black Widow proclaiming, I'm pregnant with your child, that creates a necessity. You have to follow up on that. The leader thing, no, you just assume he's about to be arrested and he's about to go to jail. They leave it open that if they chose to pursue that storyline, they could. They could bring back Red Skull if they want. But these are the types of just dangling threads I call them that you could pull on if you chose, or you can just leave them be. And I think Marvel's just going to leave them be.
I'm pretty curious though about Red Skull with the lineup being out till, I think, is it 2019?
2019, yeah.
Is there any possibility that somewhere in there they could add a movie that we don't see already in that lineup that could tie up some loose ends?
Well, I mean, with Lord Elrond, what's the actor's name? Hugo Weaving, thank you. Lord Elrond from the Lord of the Rings films. I've always wanted to see him back as Red Skull. I thought he was a magnificent Red Skull. I really do. I think he nailed it, and he made it his own. He made it completely his own character, but the way he carries himself, his intelligence, his audacity, his ego, he just made the great founder of Hydra. He was magnificent. And they did leave that little window open that he got sucked into the vortex. Yes, but so did Loki, and Loki came back. So there is certainly an opening there from the bringing of that. But Hugo Weaving has said he doesn't want to come back. He's contractually obligated to come back if Marvel makes him. He's under contract, but it sounds like Marvel's not going to make him do it. So I believe, sadly, for all of us who are big fans of Hugo Weaving as Red Skull, that's it. We're probably not going to see him again.
It's really nice of Marvel, I must say.
Yeah, very, very, very nice of them.
Andy writes, Oz the Great and Powerful sequel, any news?
I'm one of the people who I really enjoyed Oz the Great and Powerful. I know honestly, for me, it was one of those movies where I came out of it and I just felt magical. I thought it was just a magical movie-going experience. Not the best film of the year, nothing hyperbole like that. But I had I was caught up in the movies, One of the things I really liked about that film was that it felt like a crew from the 1950s made it. So it was almost like they were pretending to be filmmakers in the 40s and 50s, making a movie that takes place in the 40s and 50s. There was a double kind of performance, if you will, because James Franco not only played Oz, but he played Oz as if he was an actor from the 1950s playing Oz. I hope I'm explaining that right.
That makes sense, yeah.
But that was one of the things that really drew me into the film. It had some weaknesses, absolutely. But I thought what Sam Raimi, the director, who also directed all the original Spider-Man films, what I thought Sam Raimi did with Oz the Great and Powerful was really special, and I enjoyed it. I was discouraged to find out not as many people as I had hoped felt the same way about Oz the Great and Powerful. It made a decent amount of money. I can't remember the exact numbers. Hey, fact checker, box office results for Oz the Great and Powerful.
It might have been 80 million, but I could totally be wrong. So
how much do you think it was?
I thought it was 80.
So domestic, worldwide. I'm wondering what the worldwide numbers. I think it made some money, but clearly not enough to make them want to go and rush into production on a new one. As far as a sequel goes, I know Sam Raimi's the plan. As with most new movies, you plan to hope you can turn it into a franchise.
234
Ooh.
234 million worldwide. Not bad.
Yeah.
I think they wanted to do it, but clearly 234. This was a big budget film too.
Mm-hmm.
Not the type of numbers that demand a sequel. I don't think enough people felt.
It was 215.
250. Okay, so this is a movie that lost money. Budget 215, 234. It lost money. So I thought it made money. So I stand corrected. It did not.
Mm-hmm.
It actually lost some money. Not enough. So clearly the financial demand isn't there to make a sequel, and not enough people feel the same way about the movie as I did. That was just loved it, and to kind of maybe open the door for it to come out. So I really highly doubt. I hope I'm wrong. Fingers crossed, but I highly doubt we're going to see a sequel to it.
When I was like doing some research, I saw that Mila Kunis had said that they are all, whoever all is, signed on for sequel. So what happens then? It just gets dropped out of nowhere?
Well, yeah. Well, this is the same thing about. We have to talk about this too a lot with the Marvel and the DC films. All of these franchise films, when a studio hopes that they can turn a film into a franchise, when an actor signs on, much like in the Marvel films, they make them sign on for 2, 3, 4, 5 films.
Right.
Because what they don't want to do is sign all the actors for one film, find out it's a big hit, and want to do a sequel, but now we got to renegotiate with all these actors, and maybe they say no. Then we're kind of screwed.
Yeah.
So what they do instead is say, okay, if you want to be in Oz the Great and Powerful, you have to sign a commitment that if we want to make a sequel, you are obligated to come back. Ray, what do we got?
To be wrong, worldwide it was 493 million.
Oh, world! So it was domestically made. Oz
Maybe that was their opening
234.
weekend.
And what's
that
the
it was
number on the worldwide?
493 million.
493 million. I thought it made money. Okay, so I did think it made money. All right, so it did better than I thought. But once again, that's not the type of number that instantly demands a remake, or a sequel, I should say. And once again, the audience response wasn't, and there weren't enough people like me that loved it as much as I did. So, they get the people to sign on for multiple films, but that does not. Here's what we have to go back to this a lot of times, because sometimes we'll say, okay, that movie's not getting a sequel, and then people say to me, but John, they signed a contract to do a sequel, so that means they have to. No. Understand this. This is not an equal thing back and forth. When an actor signs on to do multiple films in a franchise, what that means is that the actor is obligated to come and do those sequels, but the studio is not obligated to do those sequels or use them. Terrence Howard signed a multiple film deal with Marvel to be in the Iron Man films and moving forward. And of course, he played Rhodey. And then they decided, so he had a multiple contract deal, a multiple film contract, I mean. So if Marvel wrote to Terrence Howard, hey, we need you back for Iron Man 2, he would be obligated to come back and do Iron Man 2. But obviously Marvel decided we don't want Terrence Howard anymore. And they went with Don Cheadle. So even though Terrence Howard was obligated to them, they are not obligated to Terrence Howard. And that's how these films work. So just because somebody signs a multiple film deal, that doesn't mean that multiple films are actually going to happen. It just means that if the studio wants to do it, the actors have to come back and do it.
That's interesting and frustrating for an actor, I'm sure.
I'm sure at some point, but you know what? Don't feel so sad for them. They get paid lots of money.
I'm sure they're fine.
One actor in one failed movie is going to make more than I make in 10 years. So you're not going to get much sympathy from me.
Don't feel too bad.
All right, what's next?
Tona Tia Grassa writes, hi guys and gals of AMC Movie Talk. Love this show, part of my daily routine. I was wondering if you guys think we will ever get a good or at least decent Stephen King horror movie adaptation. There are some great dramatic adaptations such as Shawshank and Green Mile. Heck, I even enjoyed Stand By Me, but I don't consider any of the horror adaptations any good. Also, do you guys know anything about the It and Pet Sematary remakes? Are they still in the works?
Well, I'm actually glad he mentioned Pet Sematary at the end. I was going to say, Pet Sematary is kind of a creepy little film that did all right, that a lot of people remember. They never did that as a movie, right? That was just a TV movie, I believe, that they did for It. And I remember hearing buzz about an It remake, but I can't, right off the top of my head, I can't remember if that was just going to be another television miniseries or they're actually, I think they're going to actually do a motion picture about it. There has been talk about a Pet Sematary remake for a long time, but I haven't heard any development. Has any of you in the room heard any development on a Pet Sematary thing? Yeah, everybody in here is shaking their heads. So I'm not sure. Look, it is funny when we think of Stephen King, we think of this guy as a horror writer. We think of this guy who writes horror.
Right.
But he's made some great cinema. Shawshank Redemption is one of the 5 best films I think ever made in the history based on his work. Green Mile is a great thing. Stand By Me, I believe, is a Stephen King thing, is it not? Yeah,
Right.
people are like, it's crazy. We think of Stephen King, he's the horror guy, and yet all these iconic movies that have nothing to do with horror. If he keeps writing them, yeah, we're going to see something eventually. So, but I can't think of anything that's right on the horizon right now that's a Stephen King property that is horror-based thing that is on the way right now off the top of my head.
Do you think horror is harder to adapt than over any other genre?
It's so funny because you talk to a lot of filmmakers and they'll tell you that horror is like, first of all, horror is one of the easier genres to make and to do. And that's why a lot of budding filmmakers will cut their teeth on horror. Now, horror is like playing poker. And if any of you play poker, you're going to know what I'm talking about here. Poker is a game that you can learn in 5 minutes. You can know all the rules of poker and sit down at a casino table in Vegas and play poker in 5 minutes. To get good at poker could take you a lifetime. Could be a very different thing. So making horror is probably the easiest of the film genres for a budding filmmaker to do. But to do it really well, that takes the hand of a master, right? So, but that means like Stephen King is not going to write your simple, easy, paint-by-the-numbers horror that's just good, fun, slasher action and whatever that another younger filmmaker could make, but that's not the type of horror that Stephen King writes. He writes intricate stuff with multiple levels of dimensions and stories and narrative and all that kind of stuff, and that becomes the type of horror that is difficult to make and to make it well. So that's why I think we haven't seen one yet, although I still am a big fan of Pet Sematary. But look, eventually he cranks out so many damn books. That guy is such a prolific worker. He's the James Brown of the horror novel. He's the hardest working man in show business. So eventually you got to figure he's going to crank out a horror one that's going to hit big on the big screen.
To be continued.
Yes.
Aisha Pandya writes, "Hey AMC crew, love the show. I was wondering what your thoughts/opinions are of the Bechdel test. And do you think there is an increase of movies that actually pass the test? Thanks and keep bringing the filthy."
I've only read this a bunch of times, so I've never heard it said, but I believe it's pronounced Bechdel.
Bechdel.
I think, once again, I've read it a million times, never actually heard anybody say it. So so please don't be offended if I'm mispronouncing it. The Bechdel test is a really simple yet eye-opening little test.
Crazy.
For those of you who are not familiar with it, here's what it is. It basically looks at gender equality in the movies, right? And for people who just want to say, what are you talking about? There's nothing but gender equality in the movies. Everybody's equal in the movies. Okay, think about this. I think it was a cartoonist came up with this test.
Really?
And here it is. It's a 3-stage test. Number 1, are there 2 women in the movie? Number 2, do they actually have a scene where they talk together? And number 3, when talking together, do they not talk about a man? Sounds simple, right? Sounds so simple.
Right.
Have a movie where there's 2 women in it who talk together and they're not talking about a man. You would be shocked.
Seriously, I read the movies that don't pass the test. I was absolutely amazed, at the movies that couldn't pass the test.
Yeah, when you bring up just such a simple little proposition like that, you realize, hot damn, we are not as far along as we would like to think in the movies with gender equality. Now, there's a lot of asterisks to go along with this. One is a more systemic problem, which is the fact that, I think they said only 1 out of 6 screenwriters and directors of the top 100 films each year are either written by or directed by females. And so if you've got a guy, I know I'm guilty of this. I made a film. I made a little independent film that I wrote and I directed. And guess what? My film fails the test. I thought when I first heard about the test, I'm like, I have lots of female characters in my movie and they're all strong, independent characters and they passed the test for sure. And then I watched my own movie and I'm like, nope, I failed. So it is great because I write from the perspective of a man.
Right.
That's all I know. And so when I wrote it, it came out that way. And then I sat back and realized, holy crap, it didn't pass the special test. Look at that. That's interesting. So the systemic problem is really the fact that only 1 out of 6 of these people making these films are female. So that's a
Right,
problem.
that makes sense.
But the other asterisks go along with it too. While this is a very cool kind of eye-opener kind of test, it is only anecdotal. Because you could have a movie that actually passes that test. Let's say there's a movie with you and Sinead in it. And you guys are in it and you have
I'm already
multiple...
laughing.
And you guys are talking about... you have like 7 or 8 scenes together where it's just the two of you. And, and you never mention a man once. But all your scenes consist of talking about shopping, your periods, all this other stuff that is completely demeaning to the gender to just do that. But technically speaking, it passes the Bechdel test, right?
Right.
So keep in mind that while this is a really cool little tool to be a little bit of an eye-opener, does a movie, first of all, even have 2 women in it that have scenes without a man in it, and when they're talking together, they're not talking about a man.
Right.
It's a really cool thing to really open our eyes to the fact that gender equality is still something we need to strive for in our films, but at the same time, don't look at it as a hard and fast rule. There are some movies that don't pass this test that have strong, powerful female characters.
Yeah, like Avatar. I was so shocked. Avatar.
Yeah.
Avatar? Like,
And don't tell me that's not a super strong, independent, wonderfully portrayal, gender equality type of movie, but it fails. So it's a great tool, but it's only anecdotal. Like, so don't look at it as a hard and fast, absolutely this is standard, because it fails as a test on itself, both positively and negatively, but it's a really cool little thing to open your eyes.
do you think that as time goes on and maybe more writers hear about this test that they'll actually care to pass the test?
I think, no, but I wouldn't be surprised if somewhere in the back of their heads it's there.
Yeah.
That think about, just wait a minute.
Right.
Look, Joss Whedon is one of the great ones. Anyway, so maybe we shouldn't use Whedon as an example, but let's say Roberto Orci is writing a script, and maybe at some point he'll go, maybe one of his friends, he's in an early draft, and one of his friends goes, hey, you would have failed the Bechdel test. Maybe he'll go, hey, you're right. Maybe I should make sure I've got a scene in here or something like that. As long as it doesn't affect the story or whatever, I also don't care if a movie has a man with another man talking about things that has nothing to do with I don't care about that either. Make the good movie. I don't care. But if we can start getting better at this, but once again, I think the real problem is who is making the films. We need to get, number one, we need to get more women involved in give them opportunities to get more girls, especially at a younger age, involved in screenwriting, directing, things like that. And as they get involved, make sure we open more opportunities for them to actually exercise those skills and give them opportunities to make films. And when that starts to happen, I think this Bechdel test thing is just going to kind of naturally take care of itself.
Very true. That makes sense.
All right, what's next?
Rodari O'Hara writes, since WB and Disney/Marvel has an official plan set till 2020, they don't really need to worry about anything for their future. Does that make it troublesome for Fox and Sony that does not have a clear plan for their future? Will they need to worry about when they release their movies, since it will be hard competing against these current giants?
No, there's no problem. And here's an interesting thing, Dennis was just involved in making a film that a couple of our buddies made. We had them in studio, the guys behind the new documentary film that, by the way, is #1 on iTunes right now, called Showrunners, that looks at these people who actually create and write and run these television shows that everybody loves so much, right? And Dennis was actually involved in one. I forgot Dennis was involved in that film. So I was at the premiere at the TV Academy, and then there's Dennis's name in the credits. I'm like, oh crap! I totally forgot he actually did stuff in this movie. But one of the things one of the showrunners says in that movie, he said, "I'm always scared of showrunners, film creators, film writers, or TV creators, TV writers, who say one of two things: one, we know where the next 5 seasons are going." 2, we don't know where next season's going. He goes, both of those are problematic because, number one, you should know where you're going over your next year. He goes, but if you tell me we know where we're going for the next 5 seasons, the showrunner says, then you're not you're not listening to the organic flow of your show. Like you can say you've got a plan for 5 years. That's great. But what happens if your show starts airing and you realize that it's kind of taking on a life of its own?
Right.
You realize the fans aren't taking to this character like you
Exactly.
thought they would. You realize that this storyline may have looked great on the page, but as you're watching on the screen, it's not working, He said, so I'm worried about TV runners who say, we know where we're going for the next 5 years. The one thing that makes me a little bit nervous for both the DC announcements and the Marvel announcements is there's a little bit of that involved. That's great to say we know what the next 15 films that we're doing are, but that's not giving any, credit to letting these films take on a life of themselves, sit back and watch them, and then let that kind of help guide where you're going instead of saying, no, this is our roadmap. This is what we're doing. To hell with how people respond to Avengers Age of Ultron.
Right.
To hell with how people respond to Justice League Part 1. To hell with any of that. This is what we're doing. This is our plan. It has to be a mixture of the two. Of having a plan, but being flexible and organic enough to kind of get a feel for how things are going. How is the audience responding to this? How is the story coming to life? How is it different on the screen than it was on the printed page? And so I think their futures are not so secure. Never think for a moment that their futures are secure just because they have a plan. Because their plan may ultimately be a hindrance, right? Now, going on to the other part of the question about does Sony and Fox now have to be worried? Is it going to be hard for them to compete? I've always said this. Nothing is better for a DC movie. Nothing is better for a DC movie than a Marvel movie that comes out a few months before it. That's awesome. Because when people go to the movie theater and they have a great time at the theaters, studies have shown they are most likely to come back to again to the theater in a very short amount of time.
Right.
So if they go to the theater, let's say, I'm sure I'm getting the order wrong here, but let's say they go to see Ant-Man, right? And people love Ant-Man. Like it's like Guardians of the Galaxy good. And then you got, I'm just making something. Let's say Wonder Woman was coming out right after that, right? It's not, but I'm just saying for argument's sake. Then the success of Ant-Man is only going to help Wonder Woman because people just had an awesome experience at a comic book movie. They want that experience again, and they're going to go back. The same principle applies to things like Sony and Fox because, like I'm telling you, X-Men, I think benefited because Captain America came out before X-Men Days of Future Past, right? Okay. So Captain America, Winter Soldier was nothing short of awesome. It was so much better than I was anticipating. So much better, I think, than a lot of people were anticipating. And I'm going to tell you right now, Fox jumped up and down. Fox was not scared of Marvel's success. They were thrilled with Marvel's success because they know all those people who bought tickets to go see Captain America, they are more likely to now come to our movie when it comes out because they just had a great experience with a comic book movie. Now we're going to give them another one, and we think more people, and it did gangbusters at the box office. Sony's going to feed on that as well. Fox is going to continue to feed on that. And then Marvel and DC will hopefully feed off the success that, Marvel and DC are both hoping that Fox's Fantastic Four movie is awesome. Right. They want it to be awesome because they don't want this momentum going of people just assume now when a comic book movie's coming out that it's at least going to be good. Because that's what the track record has been. So they want Fox to succeed. They want Sony to succeed. And because it'll just be good for their business.
Do you think that maybe Fox and Sony have plans, but they just don't reveal them the same way that Marvel did?
Well, I mean, we've already heard from Sony, Sony concerns me a little bit because I think the stability of that company as a whole, not just the studio part of Sony, but the company as a whole right now is in question. We've heard them say we had a plan. And then we heard them change that plan. And like as of right now, look, Sony on the record has a plan. They want to do Sinister Six. They want to do a Venom movie. They want to do The Amazing Spider-Man 3.
Did they come out the same way that Marvel came out?
Not the same way. They just kind of put out an announcement. And I think that's all those announcements flexible. But like I said, I don't think Sony or Fox should get really far ahead of themselves like Disney and Marvel did. Like I said, it's great for us fans to hear the next these 30 comic book movies coming out between now and 2020. That's great. But it does concern me a little bit, just a tiny bit. That's all. Don't start saying John Campea says Marvel did a bad thing. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying it gives me a little concern about where's the wiggle room for changing your plan. What if you realize, you know what, the way things are going now, Inhumans isn't a good idea. And they got to pull the plug on it. Will they be flexible to do that? And we'll just have to see how that
Yeah,
goes.
I'm curious to see.
All right, what's next?
Matthew writes, "Hi everyone, I love the show and look forward to the show every day. I just read that they are rebooting the Transporter franchise, replacing Jason Statham with Ed Skrein and scheduled to release the film in 2015. What have you heard and can tell us about the reboot? Thanks and keep bringing on the filthy."
You know, you come to AMC Movie News because we give you the legit S. We give you the real stuff right here. And we inform you. And, you know, so you will walk away from watching one of our shows more knowledgeable than you were when you started watching. I don't have a flipping clue. I have no idea. I don't know what's going on there. I know it's happening. And I'm happy it's happening. I think the Transporter, it kind of evolved from a one-shot idea into almost a mythological thing about this character, you know? And while a lot about these Transporter movies have been like just ridiculous and whatever, there's a fun factor to them as well. I believe there's room for a rebooting of this franchise and this character that I think is actually really cool and really fascinating. There's a mystery to him. You don't know everything about this character. We don't know his full background. That's one thing I hope they don't do. Don't give us an origin story. Don't go into the background. Keep him a bit of a mystery. You know, that he's just this driver. Why does this driver so good? He just does. You know, I hope they do that. And I'm excited to see where they go with it. And would I have liked to have seen Jason Statham come back and do it? Yes, obviously. But it doesn't have to be Statham. So we'll see how this turns out. And I've got high hopes for it.
Jason Statham and Ed Skrein, when you look at their faces next to each other, they almost look so much alike to the point of they're trying to make it seem like it still is Jason Statham. That kind of grinds my gears. I understand it's supposed to be a reboot, but
by the way, that is a great Peter Griffith reference.
Grinds my gears. Yeah. But I always stop trying to we see it's not Jason Statham. Does that ever bother you? I hate when they try to pretend like it is.
Yeah, you know what the funny thing is, a lot of people always say to me, "Oh, get that guy to play this guy because he looks like him." Who cares if he looks like him? Right. That's not the important thing. It's irrelevant. With the movie magic they can do today, they can make anybody look like anybody. If they wanted you to pick up for Dirty Harry for Clint Eastwood, they'll find a way. They will find a way to make you look like Dirty Harry. So it's really an irrelevant thing to me. I maybe part of the logic behind it was just thinking, hey, let's make this as smooth of a transition as possible for artists by making him kind of look like him. But even then, I don't think that's necessary. Hopefully, I'm hoping the reason they went and got him is because they thought he was the right guy for the role. And I hope it had nothing to do with his looks. If the looks was an afterthought and they said, hey, and a bonus with this guy, then that's fine. That's cool. But I hope looking like Jason Statham wasn't a serious part of their decision-making process.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed.
RV Singh writes, "Hey, I know you guys mentioned you've not really delved into the Bollywood world, but I was wondering, with global success and following it has, are there any plans on doing so, or are your target audiences not there? Bring on the absolute filthy. Thanks, guys."
Bollywood. Bollywood is this crazy, infectious, growing thing in the world of film and cinema worldwide. It's really kind of crazy. And I know for a fact, I've sat down with some of the top brass of AMC. AMC has plans for Bollywood and for being involved in big plans. So big that as of a year ago, I was sitting down with top brass of AMC talking about how we can add a dimension of Bollywood to AMC Movie News. Now I'm not announcing anything right here, but I can tell you that I've had several major discussions about not only developing Bollywood type programming for AMC Movie News, but how we're going to do it, who we're going to staff it with, all that kind of stuff. So I have no dates to tell you. I'm not even telling you 100% for sure that it is happening, but I can tell you right now, our plan is to, over the next year or two, to develop, much like we just developed an arm for independent film with AMCI, our talks right now are for developing another arm that just deals with Bollywood film. And I'm excited about that. I'm terrified about it because I know nothing about Bollywood film. I'm going to be in charge of a division that looks after Bollywood, but we will have the right, if we do it, and when the time comes and we move forward with it, we will get the right people in. We will have people who do know the world of Bollywood inside out and backwards. and we will throw our full support behind it, much like we do with AMCI, and we're going to have other things spinning off. Bollywood is a phase 4 plan. We're just getting ready to start phase 3, but trust me, those discussions are happening. I cannot guarantee that it will, but the plan is that we will.
That's so exciting.
And
you know so what? Different from anything that we already do.
I know. It is crazy, and because it's so scary to me, that's what makes it exciting to me. I love us getting involved in things that are new for us, and because that opens up a world of possibilities and bringing in people I'm excited about bringing on people onto the team who know so much about that world that I don't, and I get so excited about being educated about it. And
maybe we can learn Bollywood dances.
Wow, would I give people nightmares if I did that? Yes, that would be a really, really bad thing. But I remember Schnepp, there was a couple of big Bollywood films that we've been playing at some of our local AMC theaters here in Burbank. And I know Schnepp a couple of times have gone to one or two of them and come out and was like, holy crap, Campia, I've never seen a Bollywood film. This thing was amazing. It's it's crazy. Awesome. It's whatever, especially the action stuff. And right now, independent Bollywood stuff, they do some of the craziest visual effects stuff. Some of the most psychotic visual effects stuff that is so cool to sit down and watch. So while I know nothing about it, we are heading in that direction, and I can't wait for us to get there.
That's awesome.
Well, folks, that will do it for us for this installment of AMC Mailbag. Thank you so much for joining us today. Listen, once again, if you've got a topic or question you'd like to see us address on this show or on AMC Movie Talk during the week, email your question 24/7 to us at our email address, amcmovietalk@gmail.com. And hopefully you'll see your question on one of our shows. Don't forget, lots of great movies playing in AMC theaters right now, like Interstellar, like Big Hero 6, and a lot of others. Head on over to www.amctheaters.com for all your theater, showtime, and of course your movie ticket information. And don't forget, click the thumbs up button. Make sure you subscribe to us. Also, make sure look in the description of this video for our audio-only editions. You can find our podcast feed in the description of this video so you can listen to us on the way to work or at the gym or wherever you are. I want to thank my host today, Miss Ashley Mova. Ashley, thanks so much for being here. And
thanks
where
for
can
having
people
me, John.
find you online?
Twitter, Instagram, at Ashley Mova. Bye, guys.
And you can find me on all the various social media networks just at John Campia. Thanks to all the guys behind the camera. We got Jonathan, Dennis, Fact Checker Ray. Thank you guys for joining us. My name is John Campia for AMC Movie News. And until next time, bye-bye.